Hello and welcome to Mucal and Ivanka's Gross Podcast. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
I've got a cold, so my voice sounds wrong and different. How's it going, Ivanka?
It's going very well, Michael. I've had a very hectic morning
How so?
because we've decided to record this at the ungodly hour of 8 o'clock in the morning in order to facilitate a family outing to the zoo.
This is great commitment from you. Also, conversely, I am on holiday in Milan. So, although on the one hand it is 9 o'clock where I am, so I'm slightly better off in that respect. It's also meant that I've had to set up in a spare bedroom in my girlfriend's parents' flat.
What did they make of that request?
Yeah, they're cool with it. I think, they were interested in the podcast. What's it about? It's always a strange answer, isn't it? Just everything.
Anything.
It's just the search for meaning, really, and also showing off. For me, it's an attempt to slightly fail to articulate some deeply held beliefs in a satisfactory manner week after week.
There is a bit of that.
You know, knowledge is one thing, acquiring it, getting it into your brain, but also being able to kind of go cite it or kind of get it in its original form into someone else's brain is a whole other thing entirely. And it's boring, but it's a good thing to probably get better at.
Well, it's that thing of you read something, you sort of create your own internal version of it. And then often when I go back to the citation, it doesn't seem to support my conclusion. I'm like, how did I remember that? That's not what I read at all. Maybe don't use this quote. Yeah, but there's that where did I read it? And I do feel like my memory used to be much better at these things. And I don't know whether there's just because I used to be very good at picturing the page that a thing was on and then finding the page. And I don't know whether that's a function of age, lots of stuff in the brain, change of medium. Because at least when it was a physical book, because then...
Yeah, it had a sort of location thing. Our brains are good at physical locations, and that's why it's sort of to memorise things, they tell you to sort of imagine walking through a space.
Yeah.
And sort of seeing landmarks. So yeah, even just a printed page, I suppose, has much more landmarks on it than a scrolled document.
Might Google that a bit and find out if there's any theories that support my theory.
I think it's a good theory.
Because whenever we talk about a single topic, you can't reference everything. I feel the need to justify my position sometimes and go... Because to discuss a given topic, you have to exaggerate one part of your... we talked about balance last time. I felt like I wasn't balanced. But then we said it was a good thing.
It sounds like we're both, so in terms of how our weeks were, I'm just thinking, my week was characterised by quite a lot of worrying about, what I didn't say last week or what I got wrong last week. So I thought maybe we could just revisit... I just had a couple more notes on media before we... is that all right?
Yeah, you can do that. This can be episode 13, a bit of media and food.
All right, but also, do you think we can psych ourselves up a bit? Because I think the tone is sounding a little bit sleepy.
Yes, we can.
Ha 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 ha.
Is that what you're supposed to do?
Oh, it's one of the things I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
The other one is...
So, Michael, make your point.
Yes.
What is your point about media? What did we forget to say?
Just one thing that I used to get really annoyed about was that there's the same number of newspapers every day, but there isn't an equal amount of news every day. How could that be the case? So it's obviously going to be mostly full of rubbish.
Oh my God, I've never thought of that. I've never thought about it in those terms. You are right. They could just have a day where they go, yep, no, nothing's happened. Or they could print some fucking good news for a change.
Well, my second, I kept talking about politics when I meant democracy, in terms of the press. responsibility. I like politics is I was just using, and they're not synonymous at all. And in fact, I've been calling. I'd like to be able to be in a position to call for a post-political society, post-political democracy. I think is something we should be striving for, because sort of politics is wrangling and kind of sort of manipulating situations, and whereas I would like a democracy based on transparency and truth and responsibility, and rather than who is the most Machiavellian in behind the closed doors of Parliament. So I feel bad that I kind of interchange those two words, because I really don't. I strongly believe that they're not interchangeable. Slavoj Zizek, we should probably talk about at some point, has some strong things to say, how he doesn't like the John Olivers of the world and all that.
Oh, does he?
Maybe in some future
But he
episodes
also can be very...
He's a pain in the
Yeah,
ass.
it's like, just cheer the fuck up, Slavoj.
Slavoj. How do I say it? Slavoj Zizek or something?
The Z
Zizek.
with a thing on the top is a J. Slavoj Zizek.
Slavoj Zizek. And then finally, just that storifying things. I was saying, we should make it into a story, but also that's a weakness of the fact that if you try and make everything to a story, you kind of lose the truth of it. Not everything can be a story, and actually sometimes it diminishes it by turning it into a story. Anyway, that was my
Those were the things. There is room. I'm not sure if we've already referenced this story, but I had this conversation before Christmas with a person who runs a design agency, and here in Brighton, and they were talking about our local council. We were discussing our local council, and on one of the things that I find frustrating on behalf of permanent civil servants in local government is, and civil servants everywhere, they can only execute the policies and the directives they're given. They can't change. That's how our current system works. We vote, politicians represent us, they get elected based on some sort of policy that then has to be enacted, and so your local citizens complaining about the council, whilst every organisation has inefficiencies, it's like, until you give them the directives to do the things you want them to do, or if you're in the minority, it's not their fault. Many people have their bins collected. Far fewer people require the help of social care. When it comes to prioritisation, many more people will cast a vote based on their bins not being collected or their recycling getting messed up than are grateful for some social care. It's a very simple equation. And so in that setting, democracy is a bit of a funny fish, because if you give everybody a vote and people only, the majority... I don't know if it is a majority. It's just funny. People don't, they'll sort of rant about stuff that is immediate or something that's been given them in the headlines. Yeah. But they forget that, at some point, Granny might need a visit from a home help that may once have been part funded by the council, but now can't be. And that's your fault for not voting for it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and that to me comes back to this idea that we need to vote as though we are going to fail, rather than vote like what the trend is at the moment, which is voting as though you're going to be rich and successful soon. Which is just insane when you actually examine it. Yeah. So if we all voted as though everything was going to go wrong for us...
Well, Nick and I have had this conversation, if we looked at our own personal finances and our current position in life, well, there's no reason why we shouldn't vote Conservative. That's where we are financially. We are, that kind of in our 40s, homeowner, small business owners. If we wanted to be selfish, then we'd vote for the Tories. But, A, we weren't always here, and B, we might not always be here. So let's look after those less fortunate. And so, I'd never heard it, I've not said the sentence.
Yeah, I owe a lot I owe a lot to the welfare state. Like, I don't know how we were absolutely dependent on it when I was growing up. So
Yeah.
it would be horrendously hypocritical of me to start like voting Conservative now. It's like, oh well, I've had the benefit of it, so now I'm going to try and get no taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like
it would be gross.
So that, I think that's interesting. The voting as though you're going to succeed versus voting, and as though you're already successful, is another weird thing that I think people don't understand. It's like, you know,
It's been tough for me this week. Like, I'm still on contracting, and I've been like ill for a couple of days longer than I'm usually ill for with a cold. And it's like, it's expensive.
it's expensive being ill. If you're a contractor, it is.
So, food. That's what we're talking about this week. Nice, easy one.
Is it easy?
I mean, how do you start talking about food? What are you?
Do you eat?
Are you?
Yes.
What's your? Well, should we just talk? What's your diet like these days?
Oh, okay. What do we eat these days? These days we are primarily vegetarian. We are not 100% vegetarian because we're just not ready for that. I think we lack the commitment required. I don't know, because when Nick, as you know, we run Restaurants Brighton, and so which is a website that talks about eating out in Brighton and has loads of information about the restaurants in Brighton. So we have to go and eat out. I think to be exclusively anything is quite. I think lack of commitment. And anyway, I don't want to justify myself. So basically, for reasons of health and climate, we are primarily vegetarian. At home, we made a commitment properly to this before Christmas. So, end of November, we've stopped cooking meat and fish at home. Unless there's some special occasion, or unless we have, Nick's parents come and visit, because it's just easier. But when we go out, it depends. We might order vegetarian or meat, so it's not an exclusive thing. We are, and when I say for reasons of health and climate, we've spoken about health already. There are many advantages to not eating a diet that's heavily meat based. So we do that. I do a lot of when you do vegetarian cooking and your cooking background heritage is Mediterranean, it mostly turns out to be vegan, because they don't use cream. Like in Herzegovina, they don't really use cream for cooking. They don't really use cheese for cooking. So we are very plant based at the moment at the homestead. Which I'm quite enjoying. It's cheaper as well.
Yeah,
a lot, and I'm pretty competent with an onion, a tomato, and some beans.
So you're mostly vegetarian, yeah. So I am probably more borderline vegan. Again, not sort of religious about it, but at the same time, I don't like meat anymore. Like, whenever I do eat it, it just sort of seems like a lot of chewing and doesn't seem worth it to me. And I just think actually a lot of the good taste of meat comes from its preparation, which you can do with anything. Like, I'd rather do it on a aubergine than some meat, and then it's just as good. Like, it's all the kind of curing and salting and marinading and all that stuff is kind of what gives meat its flavour, I think. But anyway, that's kind of already getting political.
Well,
so stuff that I eat for nutrition, basically, the less I kind of prioritise what I consider food by how much processing does it require to be able to eat this. So sort of fresh fruit is at the top because it's just great. without doing anything. And then vegetables and things like that. But then even if you get into sort of bread, that's quite a lot of processing goes into that. Cheese is, sort of like no way. And bread and cheese used to be sort of my staple diet, and I used to think that was a thing. And now I just don't even think of those as food anymore, or I just sort of think of those as kind of clever if you don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So I categorize things as junk versus real food, and the border of that I actually kind of put some stuff that I think I used to consider staple foods like bread and cheese, and now kind of on the junk side of the line. And that's not to say I don't enjoy eating them sometimes, but even if I went out, or if I had a sort of cheese on toast now, I'd be like, okay, but I still need to eat some food. Like, that's how I'd kind of feel about it. But also, yeah, I'm sort of like staying away from sort of, dairy stuff. So yeah, technically vegan.
I think vegan from a cooking point of view is more interesting, because I like cooking. That's another thing. I like preparing food. I like cooking, and so I like the challenge of making something really tasty without the easy fallback of some smoked meat, which dead easy, put a tiny bit of chorizo in something and whoa, loads of flavour, animal fat. These things are all good flavour carriers, and they have, but I do a lot of, massive glug of olive oil at the end when it's cooked to make it more fatty. Right. Smoked paprika has been a revelation because I can totally fake up the sort of peasant stew that normally would have been prepared with some cured pig's meat, with a bit of smoked paprika and a few extra herbs. I like thinking vegan when it comes to cooking. I get what you're saying about sort of the junk food, though, and there is lots of stuff that says the least processed food the better, and cheese is a way of preserving animal fat and protein for longer than you would if you just had milk sitting on the side, if that was available. That's where it's come from. So is jam.
Not that there's really a great case for milk in the first place, another animal's milk, which you can only drink because it's pasteurized, which is another process. Milk is pretty gross.
Maybe. But it's also delicious, and it's also a way of passing on I know there's all these now, the whole, what do we process, can we process, la la la. But
most of the world is lactose intolerant for a reason, and you're getting cross.
Well, I'm
which
getting
isn't
cross
really the idea.
Because I think that diets evolve in different places, or have evolved based on the foods that are available. So if you look at Inuits, they eat loads of whale fat and they eat very, very few vegetables in their diet because nothing grows in those kind of far north regions. And then if you look at the Mediterranean, or look at Herzegovina, or the different part, it's a thing I know about, so I talk about it. But if you look at the former Yugoslavia or Croatia alone, the different areas, depending on the different resources they have available. So if they have, in Herzegovina, you can't really have a massive herd of cows because there's not the room, there's not the terrain to feed them. So therefore, the diet does not actually contain, the traditional diet contains very little milk products because there weren't any. So a family, even a farm, might have had a cow, possibly. It's like this evolution of diets, but in areas where it's cheap calories if you can feed a cow really easily.
To me, that's humans are clever, and that's a technology. To me, I totally agree. Humans are very good at being able to eat just about anything, and we're very clever at Roman armies have to march, so let's invent this bread so that we can sort of store it for a few days and sort of have some nutrition from it. But my philosophy now is, given that we now have access to actually what we really want very easily, then there's less of a reason to eat those kind of things that we sort of invented to solve problems that we don't necessarily have anymore in terms of access to kind of nutritious fresh fruits and vegetables.
There's two levels of fuel as well. There's fuel as calories to keep the machine moving, and then there's fuel as nutrition, which are not the same.
I don't know why there's a distinction there. Just if it's fruits and vegetables, then it's all just what's the difference?
Because some of these things, it's cheap and easy to eat a spoonful of fat, which will give you the calories you need to get from A to B, versus...
But how often are we in that situation in our lives?
I'm not saying that we
where
are.
Like, I just need some raw calories.
But I just feel... Oh, yeah, fair enough. But we are... If you're doing...
If you're a fitness guy, yeah, sure. Like when you start, like elite athletes, sure, right? It's like, okay, I can't eat 27 bowls of vegetables. It's going to take me forever. I get that, but I just think like day to day, most people, like, we're not calorie deficient, are we? Not in our world.
I think it's when you start talking about it not being food, it rankles me. Because
I know it rankles everyone.
Because it's like, it is food. It's just that it's not...
You got to remember, this is me with I've got to have a binary not drink or drink system, right? So, you put whatever pinch of salt on this you need, but the way I think is, okay, Bombay mix is not food. Banana is food. And then we kind of move into the centre, like bread isn't food, and that for me was hard because I've written songs about bread. Bloody love bread.
So do you not eat bread?
Well, I eat it for fun, but I don't like sometimes I'll have it a bit more than I used to, but yeah, I don't if I'm going to bread for kind of nutrition, then it's a problem for me.
I struggle with that position. Like, I don't mind your drinking binary one-off, fine. And I don't know, smoking seems reasonable. But I think, and maybe I'm totally, maybe over the next 10 years, as food technology and knowledge evolves, it'll be I'll move closer to you. I certainly have the concept of empty calories. I understand when I eat something, that's what I mean, the difference between calories and nutrition. I understand the concept of empty calories. A cheap bar of chocolate of just sugar and fat is a lot of calories for no benefit. But I don't, I don't necessarily put the pressure on myself that every meal has to be 100% nutritious when, toast's lovely.
I can't deny that the toast is delicious.
And it's not without nutritional value, surely.
Well, I mean, it's also, it's all me just being hyperbolic with my way that I have to kind of carve the world up so that I can sort of just, get on with things. Overeating is no fun, right? Like it's fun. You sort of eat, even like you think of Christmas Day, you think if you've just stuffed your face, that sort of feeling afterwards where you can't move and you sort of feel a bit gross is actually not that nice. So if we could just like eat enough, and then stop, that's the dream. And the reason that a squirrel just eats enough and then stops, and you don't see overweight squirrels everywhere, you don't see overweight animals everywhere, just even though they've got access to more than enough food, a lot of the time, it's because if you're eating the stuff that's right for your digestive system, then it will tell you when you've had enough. And the problem with stuff like bread even is that you can just keep eating it and your body doesn't know that you've already had too much because it's not able to, because of whatever the water content or whatever the, whatever's going on there, it's kind of like bypassing our systems that kind of tell us that we've eaten enough food now. So that's the reason that and that's what I then end up like categorizing as junk, partly because, you can just like knock it back and you don't even feel it. And I really do get that with bread. I could just eat a loaf of bread. Like half an hour later, I'd be like, what did I just do? But when I'm in the kind of middle of it, I'm just like...
We do the portion control thing, not overeating. I'm not like overeaten to be for that sort of, the Christmas Day thing you're describing. We haven't done that for years, possibly, because I get that. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be inactive. I know that lots of problems come from being overweight. I also have this like deep consciousness of how much of a cost to the climate is, eating a dairy-rich diet or eating a load of steak. But I think it's the whole world is moving more and more towards looking at the way the searches for restaurants Brighton is working. We've seen, like in the last couple of years, there's been a 700% increase in people coming to the site because they've Googled something vegan. It's kind of veganism is definitely, I mean, Brighton may be its own little kind of microcosm, but veganism is on the up.
No, I saw a thing on this. And imagine if we could get people, like, you got to come to it in your own way. And that's essentially all I've done is this is my way that I'm coming to veganism. But I
don't necessarily think you have to be, I'm a bit 80-20. So for example as well, this idea that you have to have breakfast every day is an invention of Kellogg's. The idea that you have to eat meat every day is not, the meat used to be a thing that was saved for a Sunday, that was for high days and holidays, not for every day.
Well, we could go back to hunter-gatherer societies with this and say that, most of a hunter-gatherer society's nutrition came from gathering and berries and, fruits and vegetables and things, and meat was a once-in-a-while thing. You'd catch a big animal, and there's a lot of... So was something I wanted to get onto was the social role of meat, and actually, you bring back a big animal, it's then sort of there's this whole reinforcing of like the social status kind of hierarchy that happens, who gets the best cuts, who gets the thing, but the fact is like everyone's going to get some because it's just going to go bad really quickly. So all the men can kind of go out, kind of catch an event like that, basically fail most of the time, but once in a while come back with a big animal, and everyone gets to have like some meat, and like the more higher status men get to kind of like take some extra good bits, and then they'll kind of pass off a couple of extra fillets to the sort of like mistresses, and all this kind of stuff happens, and the important this I mean, less so now, but even if you went back 20 years and if someone invites you around for dinner and if meat wasn't part of what they served you, you'd probably be quite offended. You'd be like, what are you fobbing me off with this for? And it's always been like it's quite socially important. And I did have this conversation with a vegan like maybe 10 years ago. And he said, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but maybe we can evolve beyond that. Maybe we can transcend that now. And I thought,
So okay. I get that as well. But I also think that we need to go binary is hard when you've spent for a lot of people. Well, maybe there's vegans out there listening now, chucking things at whatever podcast device they've got and going, you're just not, you just don't get it. Maybe I don't get it, but I think that I think the big mistake we've made both for our health and the climate is this idea that meat is more than a special occasion or a that it's kind of a staple, because that's why only because we may have shifted to eat much, much less meat now, but for a long time I've only bought organic, grass-fed, blah, 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 all that sort of like, if I'm going to eat meat, I'm going to make it the best quality meat that I can get hold of, rather than eat less of it, but spend more money on that smaller bit and have a bit more, rather than just buying really cheap, barely meat. That's, I think, a big, that I can't, where did I? Yeah,
so can we agree? I think we can agree then that meat is not a staple.
Yes, we can agree that meat is not a staple.
Can we agree not to treat meat as? Can we agree? I would like to agree maybe that milk is not a staple.
Yeah, I can agree that milk.
I think that would be an improvement. I think it's a bit gross that there's milk in schools for children. I think that's kind of a strange thing to kind of reinforce, and there's evidence to show that was kind of the milk lobby sort of thing happening that caused that. I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on bread being a staple.
I'm not,
okay.
sorry.
I mean, you can keep. I suppose you can keep bread. Like,
it's not got sugar in it. It's not got, so you know, it's like, come on.
Well, it often has, but
Not
you
if
know.
you. Anyway,
Here's some things I hate: mayo, hummus.
why do you hate
And it's because I don't like stuff that's like baby food. I don't like guacamole. What food do you rationally hate?
I used to be able to smell a cucumber from 50 paces and not be able to come near it. I hated cucumber, but I've slowly, and I think there's something about the smell that I was highly sensitive to, but I sort of committed to going, right, this is just ridiculous. It's in every British sandwich. You need to deal with this. So I sort of like, you know, bit by bit weaned myself off that. And celery as well had a really, really overwhelming flavour. There are things like, because we have this veggie box, which I really enjoy, partly because you don't choose your vegetables, you get what's in season or what they put in, so it makes you again think about what you're eating. And then you get turnips. And I'm sorry, I've done lots of different things to turnips, but they're still
What's wrong with turnips?
fucking disgusting. They just taste like earth. But I can't, you know, I've got some recipes.
Delicious earth.
Delicious earth. No, I'll eat it.
I had that. I was raised like it was like you eat what's put in front of you and you finish it.
I didn't have to finish it.
Just like there was just no, you know, that was it. Like you eat it, and that's kind of, that's how I grew up, and there was something quite liberating about realizing, actually, you shouldn't just polish off your entire plate of food just because it's there. You should eat until you're full, right? And this thing where you're trained that you've got to eat at the same times, the same amount every day, no matter what you're doing that day, is wrong. And it's a shame that, you know, the habits we're given as children actually are kind of, a lot of them can be a bit wrong. And I think food-wise is now probably the biggest gulf between, you know, when I go back to my family now, it's like they don't know what to do anymore, because I'm just like, I kind of rejected all of the assumptions that form the basis of your diet. I kind of have problems with now, and you know, so and then like, well, what about this? I'm like, no, I'll just go and I'll just do it. It's fine. I'm just gonna microwave a bag of mixed vegetables and eat it. It's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. See, I think that's also I think I'm not particularly willing to create inconvenience or discomfort for other people. So if I go to someone's house, I will eat whatever they've cooked. I don't, you know, I'm not going to start a big discussion. Though at Christmas, did I tell you we managed to do, there's these stuffed cabbage leaves that they eat in most of the former Yugoslav countries. So you've got a sauerkraut leaf stuffed with meat and rice and cooked in a soupy stew. We managed to come up with a vegan version of those for this Christmas. But I was at my cousin's house, so so we had a go at kind of coming up with a version that didn't involve meat, and it was an activity, and we enjoyed it. But you know, if other places, I'm very uncomfortable going, I'm not eating that.
I never wanted to do that either. I never wanted to be that sort of like person who like has to have a special plate with a special kind of weird sausage that the meat isn't allowed to touch, kind of thing. If a spoon touches the plate that the vegetarian food is on, the vegetarian food has to be thrown away, sort of situations. So yeah, but then, you know, I also, I don't know. I don't want to. I want some food.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
fair enough.
If someone just gives me a lump of cheese on a, you know, cracker, I'm like, I want something with some food in it.
I don't know. I think I've also, my child eats everything. There's very little stuff she doesn't eat. And if she doesn't eat it, it's the ground that she's tried it and she doesn't like it, and that's fair enough. You don't have to like everything. You don't have to enjoy the taste of everything. So she knows that that's okay. So she'll lick or try something like she won't eat avocado for love nor money. But considering how far it flies. That's okay. But I love avocado. It's probably my climate guilty pleasure. It's probably the food I eat that's travelled the furthest. But but I've also we've seriously not had, like, there's the famous Maich family month of potatoes, because that's all that we could eat, all that we could afford. And I find it, rejecting food, rejecting calories is something, you know, a source of sustenance is, I find, quite tricky. I think that's why I will always struggle with being sort of a 100% anything, because I don't want to be in a position where I go, no, sorry, I don't eat that. Unless I was violently allergic to something, fair enough. But I think there's a lot of people around at the moment with made up. There's one thing to be a celiac, and then there's another thing to be gluten intolerant, for example. You know, I know some people who get really, really sick if they are accidentally fed some gluten. And on your fruit thing, I've actually had a test that shows that I'm fructose intolerant, some foodstuffs make me swell up, and things that are high in fructose make me swell up. Not in a mad allergy way, but in a big puffy hands way. So it's like, you know, food is not the same for every fit body, and I don't mean, you know, every combination of cells does not respond in the same way to different foodstuffs. But
again, I think we overestimate the differences sometimes as well, and we forget that we're still all animals, and, you know, we kind of like, we as humans will kind of focus on the sort of small differences between each other, and sometimes it's good to put ourselves back in the perspective of, we are part of the animal kingdom, and, you know, we're not all that different. But yeah, I don't know. I'm surprised about fruit things. I'd like. I think it's a problem for my beliefs if anyone is like has issues with any fruit. Like, that's a problem. And it's something I need to either sort of like.
Nick can't eat
research
apples,
more.
pears, or cherries because they make his mouth itch. Same with almonds. Well, it's like,
I've got a problem with, like, I've got, like, one of the things of my diet changes was, okay, nuts are a primary a good source of sort of calories and things if I do just need some, but I think they kind of do something bad for my skin. Like, I think Sharon keeps sort of going, oh, maybe it's nuts. I'm like, it can't be nuts, because then what can I do if I can't eat nuts? It sort of like causes me a lot of, because I think, like, on the road, and like when it's a bit, when I, you know, I can't prepare vegetables on the road or doing something, but there's always a bag of nuts. You can always do that. And know that is an absolutely, like, no processing involved apart from cracking the nuts, you know. So that's definitely something that sits right at the top of my scale. But then if that's sort of making me a bit like, you know, makes my skin go funny. But that said, like, you know, when I switched from, like, bread and cheese heavy, meat rich diet to mostly fruit and vegetables, there was a transition period, right, where my stomach needed to kind of it needed to kind of adapt to
grow some enzymes,
so I guess
or some whatever it needs to do.
Yeah, and so I think you can probably, maybe, I think you can get used to anything, but I would like to think that, you know, the sort of unprocessed natural foods would implicitly be easier to digest than meat, which just sits in your stomach for hours and goes wretched.
also loads of psychological shit attached to it. Like, one of the reasons my mother never insisted on us, you've got to finish all that food, was because she was an overweight kid and was, she did not want overweight children. So if you don't want to eat, don't eat. It's fine. So nobody... But equally, we all eat quite well. None of us were particularly fussy. And also, I have been I'm very conscious of not being extreme in my food choices, because I was the teenage girl who managed to do, reduce her daily food intake to a tomato and a slice of a baguette, not a piece of baguette, but, the end of it. Yeah,
Really?
I did that. I got really...
I didn't know you had an eating
Well,
disorder.
I don't know that I think mine got nipped in the bud.
That's not enough food.
No, that is not enough food. But I didn't do it for a sustained enough period for it to become entrenched. But it does make I think I did lose a lot of weight. I was away from my parents for 6 weeks, and my father turned up and went, Ivanka, come on, Daddy's going to buy you an apple strudel. it's like you need to stop. So, and I drank loads of fizzy mineral water to stop feeling hungry. I did all sorts of crazy things as a teenage girl. And then after that, that's when I started doing the not eating empty calories. So if I wanted to eat, if it was a bag of oranges, that's okay, because it has nutritional value. So I think generally I try and make that. I'm very happy to eat a chocolate pastry, but I don't do it habitually. And when I do it, it's a an activity that's done for sort of for pleasure, not for. And one of the ways I've always then subsequently controlled my weight is this whole, if you're going to eat, I'm very conscious of binary food choices, because I think food is more complex. Our needs are more complex. I eat differently in winter and summer. I eat differently if I'm into a running phase. I eat differently, if I've been drinking. That's one of the things you talked about. Like, one of the reasons to not drink is to not have an unhealthy, a bag of chips and a kebab on the way
Cravings.
home. To be fair, I very rarely get so drunk that it would sway my food choices. Though we're certainly not averse to a bag of chips plate of chips in the pub to all reach for.
But I mean, what works for me? I'm not trying to tell you it has to work for you.
No,
So-
that's true.
And there's a million different things that work for different people.
But you see, did you have breakfast? You had a biscuit, you said.
Yeah, I always have breakfast every day. I have fresh fruit for breakfast every day. That's the only one. That's the one rule that I stick to. That's my only rule, is fresh fruit every morning, and it's great. It's just even for the even just for the water content. It's just a brilliant way to start a day. I just love it. And you use a knife first thing in the morning, which makes you feel like a human man and a man. So I cut up a mango, I cut up a banana and an apple or an orange or something, and I just eat it with a fork. And my coffee now. I'm back on the coffee, but it's just you can't beat it.
Recently, as part of there was a sort of like, my weight was higher than I wanted it to be, and all my usual move more, eat less wasn't really. I think I also, for me personally, that I think my body changes and responds to different things differently over time, which I don't think is in any way logical. But anyway, so we've been doing some intermittent fasting. That certainly seems to have made, jolted something. So the idea that you eat all the food you're going to eat within a 24-hour period in an 8-hour slot.
There is, and there's, regular meals isn't a particularly. That's kind of a modern invention, really, and it's not something we used to be able to do.
So it's
you just used to.
The idea of it's quite peculiar, really. But there's lots of research now talking about this intermittent fasting business. So we've been experimenting with that, and we seem to be alive, and nothing major wrong has happened yet. So that's our ongoing. I just think with I think we're talking about nutrition instead of food. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe I'm overcomplicating.
Well,
But, what the science of understanding food and how it affects our bodies is constantly evolving.
well, you say evolve, but I just think
Or we're learning more.
massively fragmented as well. Like, there's so many different things you can read
Yeah.
that I don't even know where. I'm just like, it's just not. I just don't want. I haven't got the time
No.
to do any more research, and I don't care. Like, I've got what works for me, and there may be a million alternatives that maybe probably get me to a similar place in terms of not being overweight or feeling like gross. But I can't be
Yeah,
bothered.
yeah,
Fuck it.
yeah.
I'm just not interested in like engaging with that, because it's like there's so many opinions and
yeah.
so many studies that, like, there's been so many like, you can find a study to reinforce anything, and it's like it's just all complicated, and I'm just like, I'm fine with this. I don't have any problems. The only problem is when it comes to communicating it, like, but it's just like, yeah, just make your, it's like everyone agrees 5 a day,
Yeah.
right, on your 5 a day. Actually, by the time you've had 5 fruits and vegetables, that's quite a lot of food. It's not, and so my old mindset was, oh, I've got to, on top of my food, eat 5 fruits and vegetables, and now I'm like, yeah, well, by the time I've done my 5 a day, I'm sort of done.
So, it's supposed to be
Have
10.
some Bombay mix. Yeah, 10's fine. Yeah, the more the better, the more the merrier. So yeah, exactly. They're sort of like trying to sneak it in by the back door, but it's still like psychologically saying you've got to have 5 a day. It's like, yeah, if you've had 10 portions of fruit and
That's a lot.
vegetables today, that's all your food. Like, you don't.
It's true. I think one of the things that I've observed, because you get this, coconut oil is really healthy. No, coconut oil is really bad. Olive oil is really healthy, but don't cook it. And I do go for variety as much as possible. So I've already mentioned the veggie box. I've already, like with the legumes, I just buy loads of different kinds of beans and lentils, mix it up all the time. I do, different nuts. We go through little phases where we're well into walnuts, and then we go to cashews or whatever. It's like that whole, I think the mixing it up wherever possible is something I do try and do. So I don't know if you watched that TV show ever, Eat Well for Less. I do like that TV show. It's one of my little guilty pleasures, where a family spends too much money on food, and then these two guys go in and look at what they're buying and what they're eating, and lo and behold, if you cook food from scratch, it's cheaper than buying ready-made stuff or ready cut up or pre-grated cheese or any of these things. So but one of the things they advocate is this idea of a meal plan. So on a Monday we have spag bol, on a Tuesday we have whatever. I'm like, I can't live like that, knowing what I'm going to eat every day. That's just no. But so I'm more of a cupboard of, pasta, rice, couscous, quinoa, whatever's in the cupboard, X number of different types of beans, and then whatever fresh veg. So there's kind of a, you just make it up as you go along.
It's like, it's very hard to, and this is why, I find it a pain, like, going out or doing anything anymore, because my sort of tastes have gone off the mainstream, and now it's like I'm always the awkward one when it comes to the restaurant choice, or so. But we all have our path. It just goes into me feeling like an alien, and I'm just like I'm just this little bloody alien floating around that doesn't really agree with what 90% of the world is doing, and I'm doomed to loneliness.
No, that is just bollocks.
Yeah. But don't you just feel so sorry for me? Okay, fine.
Things to feel grateful for. You can eat whatever you like. Isn't that brilliant?
It's bloody great in London. I tell you, like, Berlin was shit for being able to eat healthy for me, like to being able to eat what I wanted to eat, especially in like convenience food. We really underestimate, like even just like the airport in the UK, like even in sort of stations and stuff, all the vending machines have like, you know, healthy snacks and things. And if you go to so many other countries, it's still just like Mars, you know, just gross like Mars bars and crisps in these vending machines. I think we're quite ahead of the curve on our access to convenient, not quite so unhealthy foods in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, the fast food, the convenience food in the UK, it's very easy to eat vegan.
Yeah.
You know, even if they are sandwiches with bread. So
what have we
learned? Yeah. I think it's important to say as a summary part of this podcast is that I'm not judging you because you don't eat bread. Or maybe I am. Maybe that's what it is. I'm like, what is the matter with you, Michael? Maybe I'm judging you.
I do eat bread, I just not as food. Thanks very much for listening through to this whole episode this week.
Well done.
If you still like the podcast, you can find us at grandpodcast.com or email us hello@grandpodcast, or find us on Twitter @podcastgrand.
You can also find me, Ivanka Magic. I am @Ivanka on Twitter and ivanka.blog.
You can also find me @Michael Forrest on Twitter, and I have a website, an overwhelming website, michaelforrestmusic.com, where you can listen to my musical nonsense and see some videos and rubbish like that. But anyway, thanks very much for listening, and I will be back on the normal schedule, and hopefully my cold will have cleared up, and it'll be a bit less early in the morning next week.
Bye.
Okay, bye. 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 See you later. Ciao.
Bye. Right, I'm going to the zoo now.